Indeed, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome back to you to this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We just passed 350,000, which is pretty incredible, so I can't thank you all enough for that. In today's proceedings, there's coverage on Boeing, who are continuing their pathway to try and submit a turnaround plan. Next, an airline has set its sights on a new aircraft order, and a major airline group has published a loss for the last quarter. But let's go on with that headline story of the Federal Aviation Administration, or more commonly referred to as just the FAA, who are investigating Boeing and its key practices, giving the plane maker an order. No, the FAA is not an airline now starting to, say, fly aircraft. It's an order of what they want them to do. And as part of the latest order, the FAA has said Boeing must develop a comprehensive action plan to address systematic quality control issues. This action plan has to meet the non-negotiable safety standards that have been outlined by the governing body. The FAA says Boeing also has a maximum of 90 days to develop such a plan. However, it can provide it earlier than the 90-day window, so long as it is deemed suitable and checks off everything on the list. Mike Whitaker, the chief of the FAA, adds that Boeing needs to understand that their action plan will also be forced to address ongoing audits alongside expert panel findings. So, while the plane maker can initialize the early proceedings of the turnaround plan, it can't necessarily submit it immediately as it awaits key results. Boeing needs to, in the eyes of the FAA, once and for all, commit to not just profound improvements, but real ones. Internal foundational changes are said to require effort, but aren't impossible, and senior leadership is being called upon to lead from the front. The FAA goes on to say that these senior leaders will be held accountable during the eventual implementation process, which will be watched with a very close eye. The Safety Management System, or SMS, will be front and center, as the FAA requests that Boeing takes the steps to essentially mature this program. Integration must also be made between the aforementioned SMS program and its quality management systems, both of which have been under fire following that Alaska Airlines door blowout incident. By integrating these, the mission is to see the same oversight applied towards not just the plane maker, but also its suppliers, among many other key stakeholders. Essentially, the FAA has determined that from suppliers to the floor at Boeing, there needs to be better cohesion and in turn higher standards. These standards have not been present for a considerable period and is why this turnaround plan needs to happen. Whether it was the findings from the 2018-19 MAX incidents to now the most recent door blowout incident that occurred at the top of the calendar year, Boeing's quality issues, culture, and much more have all been very hot talking points. These panels, experts, orders, plans, and much more have been emphasized in the last few months and are aimed at correcting years, some analysts and insiders would argue even decades, of issues that have hurt the plane maker's presence in the airline industry. By the time these plans are implemented, and obviously hopefully successful, the mid to late 1900s Boeing will be present in an era that was labelled as the Golden Age. A time frame on when this will be the case, or even if it can actually happen, remains to be seen. However, you would best believe that everyone will be working tirelessly to make this possible. Because using the words of key airline executives, what's been happening isn't good enough and needs to change. Moving on to the Air France and KLM group, who have posted a loss for the fourth quarter of 2023. That operating loss coming in at 56 million euros. Ultimately, for the group, this is down from the 134 million euro profit that was recorded for the same quarter 1 year prior. They cited several factors, such as a difficult operating environment towards Africa and the Middle East, among other difficulties. In the final quarter of the year, the group also added that it carried 22.3 million passengers, which was a rise year over year and was achieved through fantastic network expansion. Across the 2023 calendar year, the group continued to rebuild across all fronts and find ways to enhance its connectivity around the world. Alongside an increase in passengers carried of 6.4% in the final quarter, there was also a capacity lift of 6%. While traffic and capacity grew, the group noted that a load factor slightly dropped towards 85.3%, this only being a 0.6% drop. It therefore shouldn't necessarily be alarming or a shock, as with expansion, the group says that the likelihood of load factors staying exactly the same is very unlikely. The goal will be in the coming years to continue building that back up. Revenues for the group were actually a strong point, with record revenue generated across the full year of 30 billion euros, which was up a staggering 14%. Operating profit nearly doubled to 1.7 billion euros for the full year. And the Air France-KLM group certainly were not the only airline or also aviation group that reported record revenues in the last financial year or full year. Like some other freight operators right around the world, the Air France-KLM group actually did report that its cargo business dropped, with revenue decreasing 23%. Air France-KLM will remember 2023 as a year where they strongly committed to their operational and financial performance. Is that a bland explanation? Yes, but they're not my words, they're the words of the CEO. Equally, they said they put a lot of focus on sustainability, and the year was highlighted with a landmark order for the A350 series, which included purchase rights. Once these aircraft are delivered, several airlines in the group will be able to not just rapidly expand their fleet, but also generally their renewal efforts by bringing in the latest generation of aircraft and saying goodbye to some of their older ones. 2024 slated to be another important year, and no doubt I'll be keeping a watchful eye on how Air France-KLM perform. On to the final story of today, and that's with Al Israel Airlines, who have become the latest company to target new aircraft as they look to expand and renew their fleet. According to Reuters, short-haul aircraft are the number one priority of this order, as the airline looks towards, no shock, Airbus and Boeing to provide them with something. Negotiations are said to be still ongoing, and it's very unclear which direction the airline will head. However, Airbus and Boeing will be doing now everything possible to secure the lucrative contracts, which ultimately have faced some actual pretty big bumps in the road. Due to conflict in the region, there has been a delay per the airline in decision-making and also the finalization of the deal. But the hope is that all of this will be wrapped up sooner rather than later so they can initialize their renewal plans. A narrow-body decision had previously been quoted at occurring in early 2024. These reports actually came following discussions that took place all the way back in the third quarter of 2023 when the airline publicly announced its intentions for the future regarding its fleet. So it's been a lengthy process with, as touched on, some delays here and there. As part of the third quarter fleet plan, if you will, they said their ambition by 2028 would be to operate 28 to 31 narrow-body plane. Now, this is a slight increase on their currently operational 737 fleet and will allow them to use more efficient aircraft types to hopefully reach more markets. If you have any thoughts on today's topics, you're more than welcome to drop them down below in the comments. Thank you very much for your support here on the channel. It is certainly appreciated. Please do take care and do also be safe. I will indeed see you same place, same time tomorrow for your latest industry news. And we'll